Back in 1991, Lenny Kravitz released the album Mama Said, and its second single was It Ain't Over Till It's Over. And I've been saying that throughout the season. The championship isn't over until it's actually over. Coda could be the deciding factor for the 2025 season. I had that opinion about Singapore. I did a podcast on that. Yeah, I forgot to announce that I did a podcast. Go check that out. It's with one of my friends. It's called Republic Formula Podcast. It's on Spotify. So yeah, go check that out. But as I was saying, I thought Singapore was going to be the race that decides the championship, as it has always historically done so, like 2008, 2012, blah blah blah. But it kind of just gave us a very middle ground answer. It showed us that Red Bull aren't out of the picture completely, but Mercedes can still be a prick to them and can really hinder their chances at a title. The only championship deciding factor from Singapore, I guess, was the McLarens at turn 3. And well, F1 Academy was pretty good in Singapore. I don't think Dorian Pan's gonna win it anymore. I think Maya Vug might take it. Anyways, this video is not about F1 Academy. It's about F1. But anyways, here's why I think the next couple of races will be the deciding factor of the championship, the Americas Tour. But before we begin, be sure to follow me on socials. I do have a Twitter and Instagram, although I barely tweet on Twitter. I just use Twitter. Also, be sure to subscribe and like this video. It really helps the algorithm out to promote this video. Anyways, let's get started. First things first, let's set the record straight. Last year, it was an impossible ask for Lando Norris to come back from 52 points with 8 races remaining. Did he have the fastest car throughout the season on balance? Sure, he did. But the peaks of the Red Bull were much higher than the peaks of McLaren that year, and it lasted for the first 8 races of the season. Yes, I did make the point that Sebastian Vettel came back from a similar points gap in a smaller amount of time. The difference is, the gap between the Ferrari in 2012 and the Red Bull in 2012 is bigger than the gap between McLaren and Red Bull towards the end of the season last year. And I think people tend to forget that 52 was not the biggest margin between Lando and Max. It was in the 60s at one point. And it's also important to remember that the performance gaps are not consistent throughout the season. It was constantly fluctuating towards the end of last year. And when people mention the performance gap between the teams, they always mention on balance, but not the track-specific performances of each car. And in my opinion, track-specific performances tell the better story about the performances between the teams last year. So now this year, Max Verstappen is in Lando Norris' situation from last year, but it would take a lot to win the championship. He needs to outscore Piastri by at least 10 points a weekend. And last year, Norris had to outscore Max by 8 points a weekend. And considering from what we've seen in Singapore, even though McLaren had a faster car, Verstappen beat both of them. So it's not an impossible ask, but it's going to be really, really difficult. Especially considering that the next race is in Coda. Temperatures are looking extremely hot for the weekend. Almost Singapore levels of hot. And that means tire degradation, that of 2013. And as we've learned throughout the entire season, the McLaren quite literally doesn't wear out its tires. You can say all you want about their aero efficiency and their downforce levels, but easily McLaren's strongest strengths are their tires always stay in perfect condition. Oh yes, aero efficiency. The middle sector is gonna be in McLaren's favor. So this weekend looks like a write-off for both Red Bull and Mercedes. But Red Bull's straight line speed has been amazing this season. I do agree that McLaren had a better car than Red Bull in Singapore, and both Oscar and Lando probably should have finished ahead of Max Verstappen. But one thing a lot of people seem to leave out about the Marina Bay Street Circuit is that yes, it's really tight, but there's still a decent amount of straights. And that was how Max Verstappen was able to keep Lando Norris behind. Yes, Max is a great defender, but it would be hard for the McLaren to get a good run on the Red Bull, considering the Red Bull is better on the straights. For Coda this week, I feel like whoever gets ahead by turn 1 is gonna win this race. Pretty much how it's been the entire season. And especially considering that Coda has 2 long straights instead of Singapore's 4 short straights, this could really be the advantage for Red Bull in the race. Which is why I think Max Verstappen is coming out on top this week. Yes, I did say I think McLaren will have the better package, but the straight line speed of the Red Bull can't be ignored. You've seen how they've performed on on high-speed, low downforce tracks the entire season, they are probably gonna knock McLaren out the park. My only real concern with Red Bull is their tire wear. And if you remember last year, the Red Bull completely shot its tires towards the end, although Lando did have 6 laps younger tires. Even with 6 lap younger tires, he was having a really hard time passing Max Verstappen until he did the good old track limits. Although I really do despise the ahead of the apex rule. It really does ruin close wheel-to-wheel racing. So yeah, Coda, I do think Verstappen is taking this. As for Norris and Piastri, however, it's a bit up in the air. I think Papaya Rules is officially dead, considering they already won the championship, but they're still gonna race with a bit of caution because they don't want the title to accidentally slip into Max Verstappen's hands. They still want to be in control of the Drivers' Championship, but they can be a bit more aggressive now, considering the Constructors is already secured. With that being said, however, I still think Norris will be finishing ahead of Piastri. Piastri has been looking super shaky for the past 3 rounds, and I'm not completely sure if he's over the Baku crash, because mental strength is really important when you're fighting for a championship, and something like that can really affect you mentally. Just look at Sebastian Vettel. And it's not out of the ordinary for a driver to, take a few races to get over such a huge mistake like that. Which is why I think he's gonna take the Mexican Grand Prix. The thinner air will really hinder Red Bull's straight line speed, so this track screams McLaren all day long. So yeah, they can't use their low downforce setup. Teams normally go for a high downforce setup in Mexico. And because of that, I really think there's a high chance Mercedes can get on top of Red Bull, so I'm predicting a McLaren 1-2 for this race, and George Russell will come in 3rd, and Max Verstappen will be 4th. If Mexico is a McLaren playground, what is Brazil? It's Max Verstappen's playpen. He's gonna win this one. Doesn't matter if the Red Bull's the 5th fastest car, or the fastest car, or whatnot. Max Verstappen will win the Brazilian Grand Prix, and I think it's gonna be another standard podium. I think 2nd and 3rd will be Piastri and Lando, and with a win in Mexico and finishing ahead of Lando for the 2nd race in a row, I think this is where Piastri starts to get his groove back and is going to continue consistently beating Lando for the remaining 3 rounds. Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. Oh yeah, Las Vegas. Let's predict that next. Las Vegas is the definition of a bogey track. It's super up in the air who can be up there. Like, Pierre Gasly qualified 3rd here last year, by the way. In 2023, Logan Sargent was P5, Valtteri Bottas was P6, and Kevin Magnussen was P7. Even Ferrari, who've been terrible the entire year and seems like they don't have any strength in qualifying or the race, I think they can be competitive in Las Vegas. That's how much of a bogey track this is. Going on a bit of a ramble, I really like the Las Vegas street circuit. I know a lot of us F1 fans didn't accept it at first because it just felt like another cash grab for F1, but in fairness to F1, when is anything not a cash grab in a sport this glamorous? It really is the perfect track for modern F1. It's also one of the tracks where, track position isn't important at all, and it produces some really good racing. It's like watching an oval race. You're just getting overtakes and overtakes lap by lap, and for those of you saying, well, there are better American tracks that F1 can race on, like Laguna Seca. Laguna Seca with these cars? Are you joking? Road America with these cars are also ridiculous. Las Vegas, Coda are perfect for these F1 cars. I still don't like Miami. We can still get rid of that one, but keep Las Vegas for as long as you want, FOM. Oh yeah, who do I think will come out in Las Vegas? I'll come out really bold. I think Charles Leclerc wins this one, George Russell in 2nd, and Lewis Hamilton in 3rd. Max Verstappen will be in 4th, while both McLarens will be behind him, because this was McLaren's worst track last year. One of the reasons why is that they just can't get their tires into the operating window they want to because it's so cold and they couldn't properly heat up. Which is why I think Ferrari and Mercedes are going to be the 2 fastest cars in this track. And I'll even say this right now, Kimi Antonelli will finish ahead of both McLaren drivers. I think they're finishing 6th and 7th. Oh no, no! 6, 7! And the McLaren driver who will be ahead is Oscar Piastri. Now, I won't talk about Qatar and Abu Dhabi. We're going to talk about those races after the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So be on the lookout for that. But to answer the question, Is Max Verstappen's title charge realistic? Well, first, let's do some calculations. He's currently 63 points behind Oscar Piastri. In Austin, I have him winning with Piastri in third, so that's a 10-point gain for Max Verstappen. In Mexico, I have Piastri winning with Verstappen in fourth, so that's a 13-point gain for Oscar Piastri. In Brazil, I have Verstappen winning with Piastri in second, so it's a 7-point gain for Max Verstappen. And in Las Vegas, I have Verstappen finishing fourth with Piastri in 7th, and that is a 6-point gain for Max Verstappen. So if my calculations are right, the net gain would go in Max Verstappen's way, reducing the championship lead from 63 to 53 points. And this would put him out of the championship with 2 races remaining. Yeah, I think this is actually a pretty realistic outcome. As I said, it's a really hard ask. A 63-point comeback is absolutely insane considering he was behind by 100 points at some point this season. The only way he's gonna win this championship is if the McLaren drivers come to blow once again. But as things stand, and using logic to predict the next few races, I think my predictions were pretty logical. They're all safe, apart from Las Vegas. That's an insane prediction. To give you some perspective, Max Verstappen right now is literally in the same position as Sebastian Vettel was after the 2015 Singapore Grand Prix. Look what happened for the rest of the season. But if Verstappen does manage to put up a decent shot at the championship, we're all gonna look back at Barcelona, we're all gonna look back at Silverstone, we're all gonna look back at Austria, and the Verstappen fans will look back in anger. And yes, I wanted to end this video with an Oasis pun. So Sally